Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for joining me today. My name is Jennifer Morse. I'm a product evangelist here at MadCap Software. Today, we're going to be reviewing all of the new features that we've included in our latest release, MadCap Flare 2017 R3. So I'm so grateful for you all to take the time out of your day to join me. I'm really excited to walk through some of these fun new enhancements that we've added. So we have a lot to cover. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. So before we get started, as always, just a few housekeeping items. First of all, I want to make sure everybody can hear me okay and can see my screen. So if you can't, feel free to use the little chat window or the questions panel in GoToWebinar and let us know so that we can hopefully help you out. But hopefully all the technology is working and you can all hear and see my screen okay. This webinar will be recorded and it's going to get sent out to all of you that have registered. So if you have to pop out early, that's okay. We'll send you a link to the recording as soon as it's done. I mentioned the questions panel earlier. If you have questions that come up during the presentation, please feel free to jot them in that questions area in the GoToWebinar console. We'll get to what we can at the end. Whatever we don't get to, as always, we will send out a question and answer document to everybody that signed up today. All right, so I think I covered all the housekeeping stuff. So again, if you can't hear me or you can't see my screen, please raise your hand, speak up so that we can help you out. All right, so I want to just review quickly the things that we're going to cover in today's presentation in a little bit more detail. So the first thing we're going to talk about is our new style inspector and some style enhancements that we added into the tool. We're also going to talk about the ability to import Microsoft Excel files. So these are probably my two favorite ones in this release. Everybody's got their own, but I've really enjoyed playing with these. We have the ability to repeat the last action, which is a small but mighty little feature that many of you will appreciate. We'll have the ability to do a text analysis. We're going to talk about thesaurus and the new thesaurus support. We do have support for TFS 2017. Now, this isn't something I'm going to show, but for any of you who are using Team Foundation Server 2017, if you're adopting that, well, then we support that now in this version of Flare. And then, of course, I've been making some LinkedIn posts about it, and you've seen some correspondence come our way, but we have 4 new project templates available to download. We do have a webinar coming about them in November, so keep an eye out on the live webinar page. We're going to be posting that very, very shortly. So you'll have an opportunity to sign up for that, but I'm going to show you where they are so you can check them out and start playing with them if you want. And then hopefully at the end, I'm just going to do a quick review of what we added to MadCap Central. We have a full webinar tomorrow, and I'm hoping you can all join Paul Steckline for that, but I just want to quickly cover a few bullet points on what's new there. All right, so I'm going to put PowerPoint away now, and I'm going to switch over to Flare. And I'm going to come back to these central features at the end. So let me switch over here. Okay, so let's dive right in. We've got a lot to cover today. The first thing I want to talk about is the new style inspector and some of the style sheet enhancements that we've made. So if anybody on the webinar, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand, but I can't see you, so I'm going to just point this out. If any of you on the webinar, if you've ever used the dev tools or that style inspector feature in a browser to see what styles are in play on a web page, then I think you're really going to enjoy this feature. But even if you haven't, this style inspector is wonderful for new users who still may be honing their CSS skills, particularly if you're a visual learner. So I think that's why I gravitated to this so much, because I am one of those visual learners. So I really sort of appreciate this feature because it's helping me hone some of my skills too as a new CSS person. So we've added this new style inspector to the formatting window pane. So up in this home ribbon, there's this button called formatting window. Now this has always been here, but I'm going to go ahead and click on this and invoke it here. But if you have an older version of Flare, if you're not quite on R3 yet, when we select this formatting window, you get this local style properties. So this has always been here, but this applies local formatting just to this particular topic. This style inspector, though, is really, really handy. And what it does is it lets you see the style details for the selected content in your open file, for example, your topic or your snippet. And it lets you edit those styles if necessary. You don't have to leave your content file and open up the full Stylesheet Editor to make the change. So we can inspect and modify the styles in our style sheet right from this interface and see how those changes affect our topic or our snippet, for example, in real time. So I want to show you how this works. I'm going to go ahead and select, you can see I've got a heading 1 here. When I select this heading 1, my style inspector changes. It shows me that I've got my heading 1 selected. So whenever we click on any element on this page, for example, the H2, you'll see what my H2 shows up. Here's my paragraph that I select. Whatever we select on this in the XML editor, this style inspector is going to adjust, showing us the style information for that element. So I'm going to go back, I'll select my heading 1. And what we can see here in this style inspector are all the properties that are set for this heading 1. So on the right, we can even see the name of the style sheet that we're using and where it is in our projects. If we hover over it, we get this nice path. So that can be sort of useful. We can use this area over here to add and edit the property values without having to switch over to the Stylesheet Editor. And the changes that we make in this style inspector window, those get written to our style sheet directly, and we can see those effects right away. So for example, I've got my heading 1 selected. Maybe I want to change the font size. I can come over here and I can select, maybe I want it to make it 3.5 M's instead. So we can see how these changes affect our topic right away when we make our change. Maybe it needs to be a different color, so I can add the color property right here, and I can select a different color for this H1 if I want to. So I can pick from this list. I can use the little style picker window here if I need to pick a style on another screen or somewhere on my topic if I don't have the hex value, but I'll go ahead and make it purple just so we can see it show up. So again, we can use this area to see how these changes affect our content file right away. I don't have to go over to my style sheet, make the change, save, come back and see how it looks. It's a wonderful way to see how these changes affect things real time. So if the property's not in here, we can always click the little plus button as I did, and we can add the property that we want to adjust. All right, so we made some changes to our heading 1. The other thing you'll notice here is we're going to see our parent styles in a style inspector. So you can see a little bit about the inheritance, that's going on. So the style for the selected content is going to inherit style settings from those parent styles if it's not like the body tag, for example. So we can see what's happening. If you happen to see a property down here, so again, here's my H1, it's inheriting the properties from the body tag. If you happen to see a property that's crossed out, what that means is that the value is being inherited, but it's been overridden by the child style. So in my example, we can see that the font size on the body tag was set to 1 M's here. And that was initially being inherited by our heading 1 style, but remember we changed it to 3.5 M's up here. So that inspector shows that that property is crossed out. So it's a wonderful way to see what's going on all elements on the page. Now this inspector window also detects the medium that we're using in our editor, and it's going to change appropriately. So if we were using the print layout, for example, so I can switch over here to the print medium or the print layout of my editor, because again, Flare lets you switch these things. It's a what you see is one possibility. So now I'm looking at my topic, same topic, but it's taking on the print version of my style sheet. So all the print settings that I've got, and it's switched into using that print medium. And so our style inspector changes as well. We can see what's been inherited, and we can see the specific style settings for this print medium. So this is really handy because if I make a change to this, for example, maybe we don't want our text to be green when we go to print because we don't want to use up color ink for whatever reason. We can come over here and we can change it to black or gray, for example. So I'll go ahead and click OK. So these help us stay on track. We're making changes in the right medium as well if we happen to be switching back and forth in our editor. So really handy, it's going to detect the medium that we're in. But I'm going to go back to this one. All right, so let me go back to my notes. I want to make sure I don't forget anything here. All right, so we could also see any local styles that are being used in this. So for example, if you happen to click on an element in your topic, like this guy down here, the style inspector is also going to show us any local formatting that's applied, and this window is going to let us know. So for example, I selected this list item here, and we can see that in red text, it's going to point out that this was formatted using local formatting rather than the style sheet. So with this information, You can make some decisions about how to manage the styling information. You can choose perhaps to clear all the formatting so that it takes on the CSS properties. So I've got my listing here. We could come over here and we could actually delete these things if we wanted. We can delete these style properties. It's just going to take on the values here in the CSS. Or maybe we decide we want to make a style class out of it so that it's easier to manage in the future. You can do that right from this area here. We can come up here and have the ability to create a brand new style class with these local formatting properties, or we can right-click and create a style class, however you want to do it. So if I go ahead and select that button, maybe I call this purple. So it's going to be li.purple, and it'll take on these properties. So I click OK. Now we can see that there are no more local style attributes applied. This is actually, we can actually see what the properties are for this li.purple class that we created. And we can see all these things that it was using, but that have been overridden by these specified styles. So it's a great way to make some decisions about how to manage locally formatted content. Even though, you know, we sort of discourage locally formatted content, it lets us manage these things on the style sheet rather. Okay, so coming back over here, we can also now multi-select styles from one element and paste it into another area. So this is another really great time saver. So let's say for whatever reason, let me select my H3s here. So we can see the property set in our H3. H2 looks a little bit different, but let's say for whatever reason, we want our H3s to have the same properties as our H2. Probably not a good real world example, but there's some elements in here we can use. What I can do is I can actually take some of the properties of this H2. Maybe I want bold and I want century Gothic. I want those properties to be used in my H3 as well. So I can multi-select, I can copy, which I just did. And if I select my H3, I can come over here and I can actually paste those properties that I created. Oops, let me redo that. So I'll go ahead and paste. So what it did is it took that bold and that century Gothic property from my H2 and I quickly pasted it into my H3. So again, a nice way to avoid having to go find the style or even hand type it in the text editor. That ability to multi-select those properties can save quite a bit of time. So that multi-select functionality, by the way, isn't only available in the Style Inspector. It's also available in the Advanced Style Sheet Editor. So if you are working in that Advanced Style Sheet Editor rather than this new view, you can still multi-select properties now from one area to another if we're just using the editor. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. So again, this formatting window, great for advanced users if some of you are used to using the dev tools, the Style Inspector when we're looking at a browser. But even if you have no idea what I'm talking about there, this can be really helpful as you're learning and trying to understand, well, what is making this thing purple and, you know, so large? Well, we can see it right away and make those changes without having to switch over and make those changes in the Style Sheet Editor. Oh, I want to make a quick comment about style sheet comments. So if you're familiar with using your CSS, even in the text editor, you probably know that you can add comments to your style. So using comments in your styles is a great way to remind you or other people about information related to that style, like which situations are appropriate to use a certain style. So if you're using the Style Inspector to create and edit your styles, you can also add comments to them. So for example, I don't have anything here in my H3. Oh, so it's always about a focus. So if I wanted to, oh, I think I got to save my topic. You know, it's funny. You do these things when you practice, and once you do them live, things are never what they seem. So I'm going to go ahead and try and add a comment. Well, I'm going to come back to this in just a second because something's not working right. Anyway, when we are in here, we can actually add comments. Let me try another one. Well, the gods of technology are not on my side this morning. We'll come back to that. But anyway, you can add comments to these styles. And by the way, if you had any comments in your style sheet that you put into the text editor manually, or perhaps you were using your style sheet editor to do that, those will show up here in the Style Inspector as well. So if they were already there and you select an element, you'll be able to see those comments show up here so that you know what that style is used for. Now, speaking of the Advanced Stylesheet Editor, I want to mention a few enhancements here. If you don't have your Advanced Style Sheet, or if you don't have your style sheet open in the Advanced Stylesheet Editor, you can always click on it from this link and it'll open it for you, which is nice. So I went ahead and I opened the Advanced Stylesheet Editor. So let's take a look. I want to focus a little bit on we'll kind of switch over to our heading styles here. So we talked a little bit about copying and pasting. We can also do this in this area as well. So if, for example, I need to use elements from one area to another, let's say we'll go to my heading 1 here. We'll look at the font. I can multi-select any of these. So perhaps, you know, I want to grab these guys, for example. I can use these elements. Oops. Boy, I'm having a hard time today. I can copy, for example, this guy, maybe the color, and I can paste it in any other place that I want to use it. So I'll go ahead and click paste, and it brings in the color. So before we had to come up here, if there wasn't color already selected, we could select it here. We could type in color, for example, and again, here's another click. Once we add the color property, we can choose our color. But if there's one already assigned in a property, we can just copy and paste it using this copy and paste here in the Advanced Style Sheet. All right, so let's see if I'm forgetting something in the Advanced Style Sheet Editor. Oh, custom mediums. In the past, if you had created any custom mediums in your project, if you wanted to rename them, you actually had to go into the text editor and rename them. So this isn't, you know, really a really big feature, but if you're using custom mediums or media queries in your project, this can save a lot of time. So mediums are found up here. So I've got, you know, you've got your factory mediums already set. I do happen to have a custom medium that I've added. So what I can do is I can right click now and I can rename it. Maybe I'll call this my medium 2. And I'll click OK. I didn't have to go into the text editor to do it. You can still go into the text editor and make that change if you want. We just added the ability to edit it right from this list, which can save a little bit of time. We can also use, another thing I want to point out, we can also use some of these formatting options in our home formatting ribbon to adjust the properties of our style elements here in the Advanced Style Sheet. So let me go to H2, for example. So if I look at H2, as an example, I don't have any color property set here, but if I wanted to add a color property, I could come in here, of course, and I could select color, but I can just come over here and I can say, I want my H2, for example, to be this fun purple color, again, like my heading 1. So I use this home formatting ribbon to apply the color. So again, it's just a way to save a little bit of time. It saves you a few clicks. We didn't have that ability in the past. If we were in here in our style sheet, this would actually be grayed out. We wouldn't be able to use it. But now we can use these little elements in this area to apply style properties in the editor here. For those of you who use the transform property in CSS, we've made some improvements on how we can handle that in our editor. So we could always add the transform property in our text editor of the CSS. So when we're dealing in CSS, the transform property is something that we can use to create like 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional transformation effects to text or an object. And like I said, you could always manage those in the text editor. We've just added the transform property to the style sheet editor and in the style inspector so that you can manage it without having to code it. So it's going to actually be here. For example, if I come up here and I type in transform, we've added it here to the style sheet editor, and we can actually start managing it here. We don't have to actually code it in the CSS if we don't want to. So we can do everything that we need to do here. So if anybody's using that advanced style sheet property, then we don't have to manage it in the code view. All right, so I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about the next feature that I mentioned, which is the ability to now import Microsoft Excel files. So we can bring in Microsoft Excel files into Flare projects, and that spreadsheet content is going to be added to tables in Flare when the import is finished. So it's often necessary to repurpose Excel data. Sometimes that Excel data, maybe those spreadsheets aren't even maintained by you, the content author. Sometimes they're maintained by somebody else in some other different department, like accounting or tech support or operations, whomever it may be. What this does is it allows us to bring it in, and we can even create a link to that external style sheet data so that it's much easier to manage. It's so convenient. We don't have to manually and copy paste content and reformat it every single time we need to utilize that information in our Flare project. So let's kind of talk about this. Now, we have a lot of choices when we can bring in Flare projects, and I'm going to do my best to cover all of these here. Before I start bringing in those Excel documents, I want to show you what they look like so that you can see what they are in Excel. So I have two that I'm going to bring in. I've got one called Accounting here. It's a multi-tabbed workbook with data on all three tabs. I've even got a pivot chart that I've added that's, you know, formatting these numbers. I've also got sort of a plain inventory spreadsheet. Maybe this got extracted from some other database somewhere. So I'm working with two different flavors of Excel, one with multiple tabs, because we can handle that too. When we bring our Excel files into Flare, much like Microsoft Word, I'm going to come over to my topic here. Much like Microsoft Word, we can start a brand new Flare project by importing Excel documents. So if I come to New Project here, I can start a new project from the import of an Excel workbook. Or if you've got a project already brewing, like I do here, I can bring those workbooks in and convert that data to tables. So that's what I'm going to do. So in our project menu, up in the import, much like we were going to be starting the Microsoft Word or the FrameMaker import wizard, I'm going to go ahead and start that Excel import wizard, and we'll go through some of these options. So I'm going to bring these Excel docs into this existing project, and I'm going to go ahead and click Next. Now, a couple choices here. I've got this checked here, this link generated files to source files. I'm going to go from the standpoint of, I'm going to bring in these Excel workbooks, but these Excel workbooks, they're not maintained by me. Somebody else is entering and editing the data in them all the time. So I want to create a link to them so that when I get my output built, I can always maintain that link. I'm not going to do any editing of that data because some other department, somebody else is doing that. So that's something to consider. If you're not going to be putting your hands on those files, you may want to consider creating a link to those source files because it makes it so much easier to manage in the future. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Flare where to get them. So I'm going to bring in my accounting spreadsheet here. I'm actually going to do both. And you'll see in a second, when we bring in these workbooks, we can bring in these files as topics, or we can bring them in as snippets. And each one has a few different choices, and I'm going to do both. So when I click Next, it's going to do a quick scan of this document. Now, this is where we can choose, all right, do we want to bring these in as individual topics, or do we want to bring them in as snippets? So I'm going to start with topics first and go through some of these things, and then I'm going to bring in another Excel spreadsheet as a snippet and show you how that looks. So let's talk about some of these options here. I'm going to bring that multi-tabbed worksheet in. Each one's going to be a topic. We can choose to organize the worksheets into different folders per workbook when we import them. So we may select this option. Again, if you're importing multiple workbooks at once, I'm only choosing one in this time, but if we were bringing more in, if you want the resulting files to be stored in separate folders in Flare, then you may want to check this box. If you don't select this option when we import multiple workbooks, well, then the files are just going to be placed in the same folder in Flare. This one here, import hidden rows and columns. This includes any hidden rows or columns in the import. You know, sometimes in Excel you can choose to hide rows and columns if you want. So if you've got that going on in the Excel document, when you check this box, it's going to bring in those hidden rows and columns for you. We can actually choose to have that first row as a column header. So if you want Flare to convert the very first row of every spreadsheet into headers in Flare, in the Flare tables, then you may want to choose this option. If you don't select this option, the first row is going to be treated like all of the other rows in the table. So I'm going to actually go ahead and opt for that. We can import Excel equations based on some of the settings. So when we're importing those files in, if they contain equations, you can select this option to convert them to MathML, which is a web standard, or you can just convert them to images. You have to have some settings in place. We give you a little information bit here. You have to have some settings turned on in Excel to make that work. I don't have the time to get into that, but we have some documentation about that. So that's a choice that you've got. I don't have any, so I'm going to leave that blank. This gives us some options in terms of how to handle those pivot charts or those images that you've got in your spreadsheet. So we can bring them in as all types of images, not all types, but many image formats here. So we can bring them as bitmaps, we can bring them in as PNGs, JPEGs, or GIFs. I'm going to go ahead and choose PNG because I want to bring in that pivot chart that I created in my spreadsheet. We have the option to split topics or snippets into different rows here. So maybe you've got a really large table, hundreds of rows or more, just for example. You may want to play with this option and divide those into multiple topics or snippets rather than have a really big one. But that's going to be up to you. It's going to be up to the data that you're trying to present. So when you enable this option, this is basically going to tell Flare, okay, well, if we've got this really large table, I want you to split it after 30 rows and create a new topic or a new snippet for me. So you have that choice. And this is a really important one too. If we're creating that link to the spreadsheet that we're bringing in, we can select this option if we want to auto re-import that spreadsheet before we build. So this can save a lot of time. If we're creating that link, let's say accounting's maintaining the spreadsheet, it may change over time. When we select this, when we build our project, Flare's going to go out and sync with that file and bring in any changes that we've made and apply all of those importing rules that we've set up here so that we can get the data in automatically. We don't have to copy and paste anything in. So that can be very handy. Okay, then I'm going to click next and we'll move on here. Did I select that? Yes, I did. Okay, so this is where we have a choice on how we want this content to look. If you've got a spreadsheet that's already styled and you want to preserve the way it's looked, well, then you can select this option. It's just going to come in looking like it did in Excel. If you don't, maybe you just want it to come in as just a plain, raw, sort of naked table. Well, then don't preserve the styles and it'll just come in as a plain table. The other thing you can choose to do, maybe you've set up some different table styles that you're using in your documentation, to unify the look and feel of how your tables look. You can choose to apply one of your table styles right here, so which is what I'm going to do. So I'll select one here that I've created, and I'll go ahead and click open. Let's click next. So that's the table style I want to use. Now this is really interesting. This is an area where we can actually filter in each worksheet that's coming in. So remember, this was a 3-tabbed worksheet. It had one called income, one called personal expenses, one called operating expenses. Here we can actually choose which rows and columns we want to bring in. So if we didn't want to bring in, well, let's do another one here. Let's go to personal expenses. Maybe we don't want column E in here. So it's actually here, but we're filtering out what columns or rows we want to show up. So if you don't need it, you can actually come in here and deselect it if you want to. And then I'm going to go ahead and click finish. And we'll get a little bit of a preview, and I'll go ahead and click accept. So what Flare did, anytime you bring in a Word doc or bring in an import, Flare's going to create a folder for you so that you have a place to get to all these things. So here are the 3 topics that we brought in, and let's take a look. I'll open up income here. So here's that style, or here's that table that I brought in with all of the data. Here's my pivot table, or my pivot chart that I created. It came in as an image. So now we can do what we need to do. Does it need to go in a different place in this topic? Does it need to come out of the topic? You want to use it somewhere else? It's its own separate file. It applied the table style that I wanted it to use. You can take a look at operating expenses here. And we can take a look at the personal expenses. So remember, we chose to remove that 3rd column in the personal expenses in that filtering option. It actually took that column out for us. So that's how we bring them in as topics. And now we can start using this data and again, it's linked to that spreadsheet. So when we create that link, it's something to be mindful of. You're going to be warned, but let's say we come in here and manually affect this data in here. Because we've created that link, Flare is actually going to go and check that document when we build, because I told it to. If we were going to be manipulating this data on our own, well, then maybe you may choose to break that link and not create that connection between the two so that you can manage it on your own. But because I did, even if I make a change in here, because it's linked, when I go and build, it's going to pull in and override any changes that I make in this topic. So something to be mindful of when you're playing with this feature. All right, so we brought those in as topics. I want to do the same thing, but now I want to bring in a spreadsheet in as a snippet and talk a little bit about that before we make some edits here. So I'll bring it in again. I'm going to bring in my other Excel worksheet now as a snippet. I'll click next. Now I'll add it in. Go bring in that inventory one. So it's going to do a little bit of a scan now once we click next. So this time I'm going to choose snippets. Now we've got some options here. Again, if it was a multi-tabbed workbook and you were bringing them in as snippets, each tab, you can choose to make those tab titles headings in your snippet file. You can also tell Flare, okay, when you bring it in, make a topic and drop all of those snippets in there. So, sometimes with snippets, you just want the data, but if you want to make those tab titles headings, you can select this box. I just want to bring in it as a table snippet, so I'm not going to select any of these things. Again, we have the same options here. How do we want to handle the different worksheets? Do we want them in different folders? Do we want to import those hidden rows or columns? I do want to make that first row a column header, and I want to go ahead and create that link. I want to establish a connection from my import to the file wherever it's being maintained. And then I'll click next. I don't want to preserve those styles. Maybe I want to use a different style sheet here. So I'll select that one. And I'm going to go ahead and bring everything in. So I'll click finish. It's going to import everything in. And pretty soon we're going to have it in our, yep, looks good. And we'll click finish. Now, if we come over to our snippets folder, where our snippets generally go by default, we have a new folder here where that little guy was inserted. And here's our snippet. So my new table style was applied, the one that I selected, but all my data is preserved. So now I can use this if I want to, just like a regular snippet. Suppose I was in this topic here and I needed to enter him in. I can select and I can just drag him over, and all of that content is there. So it's a great way. So I got to do some save. When we select this linking, Flare's going to want you to remember, hey, do you want to save this document because you're editing outside the editor here. So once we make a save, those changes to the style sheet that we told it to make are actually applied in our topic. So there's all of our data. Now we made that link. So remember, the beauty of this is if you're not maintaining these spreadsheets, somebody else is. Anytime somebody makes a change to one of those, it's going to be preserved. So if I come back over here, maybe my accounting spreadsheet, for example, here's we're talking about estimated versus actual sales. Let's say, for example, the sales team blew it out of the water. They actually did $100,000. So our table, our little chart changed. Once we save, if I come back into Flare here, if I were to build this project, it's going to, where was it here? I can actually, let's come over here to income. If we were to build it, then all of those changes would still apply. Now, I haven't done anything. You see it still says 90,000. Rather than build it, I can actually force the re-import again, and we'll see those changes. So that forcing that re-import would be the same thing like building it, essentially. So I'll come over here. Remember, Flare saves those import rules, so you can always edit those things. I'll go ahead and do a re-import. And hopefully this won't make a liar out of me, but all these things we'll go ahead and save and do an overwrite here. We'll pretend like we're building our project, and it's going to build everything in. And when we take a look, we'll hopefully see those changes that we made. And he is over here. And there's my change. So that same thing, remember, we went from 90 to 100,000. So if we didn't force the re-import, if we just built the project, we'd see that same effect. It went and talked to that spreadsheet, brought in that new data so that it appears. So again, we don't have to copy and paste anything and waste a bunch of time. This just makes it much easier to manage. All right, so I see some questions coming in. We're going to be getting to those at the end. So the next thing I want to talk about is the repeat last action. So this is, like I mentioned in the beginning, a small but very mighty little feature that a lot of folks have requested. So if you've used Microsoft Word or other tools that have that repeat last action functionality, hopefully you'll appreciate this one. Very common command. When we're working in the XML editor in Flare here, we can use the F8 shortcut key to repeat our last action. It's the same controller that's used when you create macros in Flare, so only actions that are supported by the macro controller are going to be supported for this repeat shortcut. Now, you can still record a macro if you have multiple things you want to do, but for really quick actions that you want to repeat, you don't have to spend time recording one. So let's do an example here. So let's take a look at this image here. Maybe this image, I want to apply a thumbnail class to this so that it's a lot smaller when we view it, and so when the user clicks on it, it opens up like a little thumbnail image. So I'm going to select it, and I can actually apply that style a couple different ways. I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to apply my thumbnail class to this. So it's going to shrink it down. I can actually select this guy here, and if I hit F8, you can't see me doing it, but I just did, I promise. It actually applied that same action. Same thing, maybe I want to apply a conditional tag to something. Maybe I want to come here, this is sensitive information. I want to apply one of our color-coded conditional tags here. I can right-click, come to conditions. I can choose my condition tag. I think that was like 3 clicks. Okay, so there it is. That's wonderful. Oops, I don't have my conditional markers turned on. Maybe that would help. So here's my conditional tag, but maybe I want to do the same thing to this piece here. I can just click the F8 button or the F8 key, and it applied that same conditional tag. So again, a little bit of a small feature, but I think a huge time saver and one that I think a lot of people will appreciate having. Now, if you don't like F8, if you want to use a different shortcut key, you can always come over here and change your shortcut keys like you can for anything. So we can come over to Options. We can come over here to the, where is it? Is it the interface? No, it's the XML editor. Where did it go? Oh, keyboards and shortcuts, here it is. We can choose our shortcut keys and manage them here. So if you don't like F8, if you want to use F4, feel free to do that. Oh, speaking of options, I forgot something really important in the style sheet. If I could just switch gears for a second. One of the things we gave you the ability to do, we give you the option now when we're looking at our styles in our style window. So this is something that's come up a lot. You can see here that we've got a little preview of what the style is here in our style window. Same thing here in our, if we use the style window over here on the right-hand side, we see this preview of what they look like. We now have the option to turn that on or off. So if you don't like to have the preview, and again, this is actually handy. If you've got, let's say, some settings applied to your style class, maybe you've got a lot of margin or padding on there, it can sometimes be a little bit hard to see what the style is or selected in the list. We give you the option to now turn on or off this preview capabilities, and I'll show you where that is. Sorry about that, I forgot. So if we come over here to Options, so if you want to turn it off, for example, it's going to be on by default, and it's going to be in the XML editor. Here we've got it turned on, show style preview in the UI. If we don't want to see the style preview at all in our UI, we can unselect this box. We'll click OK, and it goes away. So we just have text here. Now, you know, you can still see, if you hover over the style, you'll still get that styling information, but that preview went away. So for those of you who found that distracting or you don't like to see it, it's now an option that you can turn on or off from the File menu, again, over here in the Options, and it's in the XML editor. I'm showing this again because I completely forgot where it was, to be honest. Okay, so there it is. All right, so I want to move on now to the text analysis. So let me move over to my new topic. Okay, so a new text analysis tool has been added that lets you evaluate your files for things like readability, average sentence length, and it can actually provide some perspective on how easy or hard it is to read your documents. And this is an interesting feature. This came up as something that was pretty highly requested at our MadWorld conference this year, just in April in 2017. A lot of folks, we had a sort of a wish list session in part, I think it was on the last day. A lot of folks raised their hand and said, hey, it'd be great if we had this readability or text analysis feature. So we decided to add it in. So we can look at our text and see what are the readability scores, what are the grade level scores. Now the scores that we can see are based on the Fleisch Reading Ease and the Fleisch-Kincaid grade level tests. So for Reading Ease, a higher score indicates that the text is easier to read, and a lower score means that it's harder to read. So this grade level is the Fleisch-Kincaid grade level score is actually based on grade levels in the United States, in the US educational system. So if we see a score of 6, that means it's a 6th grade reading level. So I'll show you where it is. I'm going to create some real estate here. So up in the Tools menu, we can see there's a new text analysis button. So if I click this, oops, let's increase this since this got really, really small. What we can do is we can analyze a bunch of things going on here. So right now my focus is in this particular topic. So in this window, we can choose to analyze the readability, we can choose the average sentence length, the punctuation density per sentence, the number of unique words, and we can go ahead and if we click this button, we're going to get an analysis. So this tells us a little bit about what's going on. Now we can analyze, we can also, analyze this text, and we can look at the current document, which is what we're looking at here. Let me actually do it again. We can look at a different file. So we can choose some other file somewhere else in some other project or in another piece of this project. We can look at, we can look at the documents in the folder. So everything that's in this What's New folder over here will be analyzed. We can look at all of the open documents up here. We can pick a folder or we can select the whole project. So lots of options. We can also compare options. So maybe we want to look at this text versus text in maybe a different file, or maybe we want to look at the whole project. So when we analyze it, we can look at what's going on. We can look at this one and compare it to the whole project. So again, this is not the be all end all in terms of how easy or hard it is to read, but it's just a tool you can use. It's a great way to keep things in check. Maybe you're working as a team and you want to ensure there's consistency of writing style among the different team members, or maybe your organization wants to maintain a reading level standard of a certain grade. So having this analysis can help you keep in check. So these metrics aren't, this isn't like a MadCap designated thing. This Fleisch reading ease and the Fleisch Kincaid grade level scores are sort of a respectable standard, which is what we used to provide this data. So if that's something that's important to you, we have this easy way to analyze the text now. All right, a thesaurus window. I want to talk about our thesaurus real quick. So we've added a thesaurus now, so we can quickly view and select words related to various files. So this works very similar to how it works in Microsoft Word. So I'll go ahead and pull it up. A few different ways to get to the thesaurus. If you're in the Tools ribbon menu, which I'm in now, I can click this thesaurus button, and it's actually going to pull up. Because it sensed that I was in this word, when I invoked the thesaurus, it actually filled it in here. And we can use any of these words here. So if I prefer to use easy rather than effortless, I can right click and insert it if I want to, or I can copy it and use that word somewhere else, but I'll go ahead and insert it. So it changed it from effortless to easy. So much like it does in Word, we can also right click. Let's see, maybe we want to, I'll right click on getting started and see what we get. I can go to synonyms, and I can also choose various synonyms, or I can invoke the thesaurus from here as well. It's going to take me to the same place. We can even just come up here and search on a word. Maybe we want to search for the word word. I don't know. We can just use it as a searchable thesaurus and find different words that we need to use. So you don't necessarily have to be in focus. We can just pull it up and start searching on different synonyms. So again, very simple to use. If you're used to using this in Word, it's going to work in a very similar fashion. Now, I mentioned we can't show the TFS 27 support. Oops, got to edit that there. Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. So we now support 2017, TFS 2017. So if that's a source control tool you're using, we can support that now in this version. I do want to switch over to the project templates. I mentioned that I made mention of those in some of the LinkedIn posts. You've probably seen some dialogue about them from various emails that we sent out, but I want to show you where we can get to those templates. They are available on our site, so I'm going to switch over to our website now. So I'm actually in the What's New in Flare 2017 R3 page. We have a link directly to these project templates here, so I'm going to get there from here. We give you a little bit of a preview of what these templates are. This is the first of a larger gallery that we hope to include. So if you're interested in using something other than the ones that come out of the box with Flare, these are really, really fun that you can download and start using your own colors and your own icons, your own corporate branding. You can give it your own personal touch, but they're slightly different than the ones available out of the box, but they're completely free. They're available for you to download and use. You can view them. So if I were to come down here and view this guy, for example, we're actually hosting them on MadCap Central. So it's a nice way to show off our central tool, but we can kind of see how they look, how they feel, what do the topics look like. But again, they're just there to get you going. You can change all elements of these things if you want to. We just wanted to make it easy to give you something else that you can use and modify. So we have 4 different ones to choose from here. You can check them out, but please keep checking back. We hope to add more of these in the future, so we have more of a larger gallery to choose from here. All right, so we're coming towards the end. I want to switch over to PowerPoint now. I do want to make quick mention of some of the things going on in Central. Oh, by the way, on these project templates, as I mentioned in the beginning, check back to our live webinar page, because we will be having a webinar in mid-November. I want to say it's November 16th. I may be wrong, so forgive me if I've spoken incorrectly, but the webinar page is going to be updated shortly, and you can sign up for that. Justin Bondock, one of our product specialists, is going to be walking through the templates, how you can edit certain elements, and give you a little introduction into them and some of the things that you can do. So I hope you'll join us for that. I quickly want to review just the new features that we've added to Central. We will be having a live webinar webinar tomorrow. You can still sign up today. Paul Steckline, our documentation manager, is going to be going over some of those new features. I encourage you all to sign up, but just real quick, some of the things we've added. We can now track progress of our Flare projects. We're using these really fun interactive project checklists, and we can add, think of them like virtual sticky notes or a virtual to-do list. They're so functional, and we can create these checklists for individual files in our project, or we can make generic ones. Maybe it's a to-do list for the release. You know, these are all the things you have to do before you release your output. So it's a really handy way for your team or for you individually to keep track of what you need to do to get from A to B. And he's going to walk through those. We've got editable vanity URLs for targets and builds. So before, we could only change a small portion of that vanity URL. So if you're hosting your output on Central, we have some more choices on how to change or edit that vanity URL. There's still an element of that MadCap Central URL that we need to change. We're working on giving full editing capabilities, but we have more things we can edit now in that vanity URL. And because we can edit that vanity URL, it allows us to have multiple targets have the ability to be set to live. Again, so if we're using Central as our hosting engine, previously we could only set one target build to that live setting. Now we can rename those builds to version 1, version 2, version 3, for example, if you want to. And you can set multiple builds to that live status. So it also could be an easy way to keep track of those versions that you're publishing to live, or when we're using Central as a hosting engine. We can create private URLs for our builds. So private URLs mean every time we do a build, if we keep the build or if we set it to live, in addition to the vanity URL, Central is going to create a private URL, and this makes it really easy to share your builds with other users within your Central license. Really helpful for QA. So rather than telling another Central user in your organization, hey, log in, go to this project, go to this build, check it out, let me know what you think, you can just copy this private URL, email it, or create a task, or get that URL to some other user within your Central license. They can just click on it, and it's going to know that they're authenticated in Central, and it's going to show them the outputs so they can start reviewing it right away. We can hide our live builds from search engines. So if we want to, any builds that we set live in Central, if we're using it to host, we can remove the ability for web crawlers to search and find those things. It doesn't completely privatize your output, but it hides it from the web crawlers out there. You'd actually have to have that live URL in order to see that content. We have now, we've added project linking support. So if any of you are using the 3 sort of big project linking features in Flare, so global project linking, runtime merging, or multilingual output, if you had all of that set up in Flare, now those projects that are linked in this fashion can be synced up to Central, and you can actually use Central to build and host that output as well. So if you've got projects set up like this, it lets you use more of Central now than you could before. So Paul's going to go into all of these in a bit more detail tomorrow. I hope you'll have the opportunity to sign up. All right, so before we get to some questions, a couple reminders. Since you signed up today, you do get a discount on these 2 upcoming training classes if you want to take some of your CSS skills to the next level. We're going to be incorporating some of the new changes to the style sheet, some of the style sheet things that I mentioned today. So the style inspector, some of the things you can do in the style sheet editor, those are going to be incorporated in this new training class coming up on the 14th and 15th. Also a single sourcing training the next 2 days. So if you've signed up today, you do get a discount. They're normally $5.99 each, so they're $4.99 since you signed up for today's webinar. So reach out to us directly if you have questions, or call your sales rep. We're happy to help. As I mentioned, our new top navigation project templates are available, so feel free to visit our website and check those out. Also, a reminder about MadWorld, can't help but mention this, June 3rd through the 6th next year at the beautiful Hotel del Coronado. Hope you all can come. Our speaker lineup and the sessions are all available online. You can save $600 on your registration through December 31st. So pop on over to that URL or go to our website. There's direct links to MadWorld on there. You can check it out, and hope you'll be able to come. All right, so we have a few minutes left. I want to get to, boy, we have a lot of questions. Let me see what we can get to here in this time. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so this question maybe came in before I got there, but I'll go ahead and repeat it for everybody. If you switch to the print view, will you see the styles for the print version of the styles that are different? So the answer is yes. If we were in the print view in our XML editor, then that style inspector is going to change, and it's going to show you the styles that are applied in the print medium, and so you can make those changes appropriately. So good question. Just so everybody, for a repeat for everybody, yes. It's being mindful of the medium that you're in your editor. So again, are the style inspector changes automatically saved to the style sheet? The answer is yes. And I didn't show this. In fact, let me go back to Flare since I have a little bit of time. You can also, oh, looks like I closed it. Let me pull it back up again. So the question was, do they automatically get saved to the style sheet? Yes, they do. But you can also undo those styles. So let me come up here. Oh, it is open. Okay. So if we were to come back and let me bring up our style sheet window, our style sheet inspector again. If I were to make a change here, so this H2, maybe we don't want it to be purple, we'll change it to some other color. We'll make it green. And I click OK, you also have the ability to undo it. So if you want to undo that last change that you made, because now it's green, then we can come up here and undo it. And it's going to go back to purple. So that gets written to the style sheet, and we can do a quick undo if we want to make that change. Let's see. Yeah, so again, are the changes in the style sheet inspector saved automatically? Yes, and you can undo that last save if you make them too. So here's a question. Is there any way to test a project even in, say, Analyzer for local styling? That's a great question. Yes, you can actually create a style suggestion report in Flare where you can run a report on where Flare will actually show you or give you a report, like all the topics where local styles have been used, and you can go in there and make some decisions about whether you want to keep them as local styles or make them manageable in your style sheet. If you've got MadCap Analyzer, not only will it show you those files, but you can also quickly apply, create style classes out of those suggestions too. So Analyzer, so you can do the reporting in Flare, you can see all those suggestions, but if you've got Analyzer on your machine, not only can you see those suggestions, but you can take quick action and create style classes out of those local styles right within the Analyzer tool. So that's a huge time saver. So Analyzer will give you both capabilities. Okay, so let me keep going here. We have a few more minutes. So again, so I think maybe I went quickly. The question was, how do I get to that formatting window? If you don't have it open, I'll go ahead and close it here. It's going to be up in the home ribbon, and it's right here in the style section. So if I click formatting window, the style inspector window will open again. Okay, so here's a question. Does Excel import create a table CSS file? So it's going to create, that's a really good question. Let me think of the best way to answer that. It'll create a standard CSS file in your CSS folder, but you can actually apply one. So if there's one already in your style sheet, let's say you bring it in and you don't like what it looks like, even if you already bring in that Excel spreadsheet and you chose the wrong thing, you could always select the table that gets created and reapply a different style or table style in your project, or create a brand new table style and apply it. So even though you choose a certain option when you bring it in, you're not stuck in that path. You can make a change. Okay, so I'm looking at more questions here. I'm looking at for ones that there's a few where multiple people ask the same thing, so I think those are good ones. Okay, let me keep looking here. Looking for ones that aren't already answered. Let's see. Let's see. So here's a good question. So why would you want to import Excel data into a snippet? What's the use case for that? Maybe you need to present that table in lots of different topics. So in my example, let me go back here. So I brought this snippet. Remember, we brought in this plain inventory table in as a snippet. So there's Flare telling me that it's a snippet block here. I may need to use this data again in some other topic. Let's say over here, you know, maybe I need to bring this snippet in and use him somewhere else for whatever reason. So it's a really quick way to have the same data or that same table of data preserved in lots of different places. And the beauty of it is, if you're not maintaining that spreadsheet, if somebody else is maintaining that spreadsheet, if you created that link like I did, when you build your project, it's going to pull that data in. Everywhere that snippet is used, it's going to be updated for you automatically because it's updating the data in this snippet file here. You don't have to manually go into every single topic where you added that table and make that manual change. We're maintaining it as a referenced insertable snippet here. So it can save a lot of time if you need to use that table data in lots of different places and update it and have those changes cascade everywhere it's used. So here's a good question. In the text analysis, what does unique words mean? And that means words that aren't actually replicated in the project or the topic. So that's a good question. Here's a good question. How do I register for tomorrow's webinar? Well, let me show you. I'm going to pop over to our website here, and I'm going to show you exactly where to go so you can all see. Up here in the resources, we've got a webinars button. And right here, front and center is Paul's webinar. So if you haven't signed up yet, feel free to do so. If you can't make it, well, then we'll send you a link to the recording when it's done. So I encourage you to all to pop over there and sign up for it. Okay. Let me look at some more. We've got a couple more. I think time for one more question. Let me find one real quick. Let me see here. I see some questions coming in. Oh my goodness, fast and furious. So what happens if someone adds or delete rows or columns to a linked Excel file? Are those updates reflected in Flare, or is it only the rows and columns that were originally imported? Well, if we've created that link, okay, if somebody goes in there to that source Excel file that we're bringing in and deletes a row or a column, we've established that link. So when we re-import manually or we do a build, it's going to go and grab those changes. So whatever that person did, whatever rows they deleted or columns that they added or deleted, it's going to bring all of that data in and apply those other import rules that we set up so that we don't have to manually make that change. At any time when we do a build, when we establish that link to those source files, it's going to go and check them and bring in any changes that are made. So hopefully that answers your question. All right, it looks like we're at the top of the hour. I'm going to keep this questions panel open for a little bit. There were some others that I was not able to get to. I apologize. We're going to compile a question and answer document on all of these, and we're going to send them out to everybody. So if you have any last minute questions, feel free to jot those down. I also am going to leave my email up here for just a minute. If you don't have it, feel free to drop me a line. Would love your feedback. Continue to send any suggestions that you'd like to see. If there's something that sort of caught your eye or you'd like to see something expanded on in the future or maybe in another feature, send it to me. We'd love to get those in front of R&D on your behalf, so keep the suggestions coming. Again, I want to thank all of you for joining me today. I really hope you found this helpful. I hope you'll get R3 installed and start tinkering with some of these things. There's a lot of information in the What's New topic in the documentation if you want to read into some of these things in more detail. And hope you join us tomorrow and for the future webinars coming up. So thank you again, everybody, for joining me. I hope you have a very productive rest of your week, and we'll see you on the next presentation. Thanks so much, everybody.